Hey there, GolfCask Nation. This is Brian Bailie here bringing you another Between the Ears Wednesday night at 8 p.m.-ish Eastern Time. And we're going to be talking the great philosopher who dropped a lot of knowledge on us last week and put the golf world in an uproar, which I didn't understand why there was an uproar, but the golf world was completely in an uproar for about a news cycle, about 24 hours before the next segment came about. But we're going to talk about Scottie Scheffler and kind of his introspective thoughts on golf and life and things like that. But before we dive into Scottie and that, I know, Mike, you were over at the Scottish Open. Any, other than getting a sunburn, any cool stories or tales from over there?
Stories or tales, just ones that relate to experience working with the player and the team, but probably leave those out. They're all good. They're all good stories. No, it was really cool. Here's one thing that I'll mention that I find that I really appreciate. So they, at this club, the Renaissance Club, they've got this, really nice setup for the range. It's framed by trees all around it at a links course, but there's quite a few trees at this links course actually, especially in that front nine. So it's not your typical stereotypical links course, I don't think. But anyway, what they have is this really cool little cafe right there on the range, and it's for the caddy and the player support and players if they want. Everything's free: snacks, sandwiches, coffee, drinks, smoothies. Not alcohol, of course, but you have all of this stuff all available for all of these support people. And it's like I thought the PGA would have been higher level, but this Scottish Open, they did it right. I thought that was pretty amazing. So those are the kind of things I really appreciate. It's like you just go and eat for free all day long if you want to. So I
So
thought
you
that
just
was
hung out at the
cool.
cafe. Is that what you're
Yeah,
telling
just a
us?
little cafe, open, chairs, soft chairs. You can hang out with your team and have your conversations right there. So, um, yeah, it was really cool. I did get to meet a guy that I've known through podcast and online for a long time, and they asked me to write a chapter in their book. Gary Nichols' his name, and they have the lost art of putting and the short game and golf and all that. So anyway, I got to see him. I just happened to see him sitting there at that cafe, so that was a nice little added bonus to be able to see him in person and talk with him a bit. Yeah,
Nice.
those are the kind of cool things. And then being out on the golf course was great. Played with Victor Hovland the first practice round, and Victor, he's a talker. He can talk. He's fun, nice guy, super
Yeah.
nice guy, but he talks most of the time he's out there. It was really quite something. And you had Eduardo out there who has all the stats programs, and he's out there talking to a lot of the players, of course, because
Yeah.
a lot of people utilize him. But no, it was good, great experience. I love to be able to be there to observe all of what's happening and all the interactions and be there if I'm needed. And so that's the second time I've actually been to a tournament. Probably will do some more down the road, but don't need to be there that often. Just every once in a while, just to be sure that you really get a really clear idea about what you're talking about when you're on your Zoom calls.
Yeah.
And then be able to troubleshoot when you need to at the time. But yeah, really good experience.
So was your player in his practice round looking for you and you're at the cafe?
No, I'm where I need to be when I need to be there.
All right. Just making
I
sure.
can bring those snacks with me. See, that's the
That's
whole
right.
thing. Yeah.
You're the guy over there stuffing them in your backpack.
Right. Yeah, I can travel with those.
Not a problem. Not a problem. Chris, how you been? Anything exciting going on?
Very well. No, we're just teaching the daily grind,
Yeah,
That's
no,
a good
it's been
thing. We
hot
just
this
finished
summer.
the state open here in Virginia. So we had 3 players in that, all top and top
Nice.
5. So that's good. And so that was a busy week, but looking forward to Scheffler and all things that have to do with his insight and philosophy and his continued growth, which is going to be really cool to watch. I got to say, I can't wait to hear some of Mike's insight on some of the questions we have.
No, I thought it was really cool. Yeah, we'll dive into Scottie here, but I thought it was kind of cool that after the round, everyone's like, great, Scottie, blah, blah, blah. And they interviewed DeChambeau. And I'm like, oh, God, like, where's Bryson going to go? And because you just don't know where Bryson's going to end up. And he goes, I played with Scottie a lot in college. He was a little of a hothead, and he is, but he was nowhere near this good. I love it. I love it. But that just goes to show you there is growth. The growth does continue. So the really cool part is that Scottie has gotten a lot better since college. And we'll dive into some what Scottie said. So any thoughts before I read you a couple quotes from the Open? Any thoughts that jumped out at you from the play?
Chris, you have any from the Open?
Yeah, there are a couple, but I'm curious because the view from the Scottish to Portrush, they were very different golf courses.
Yeah.
And often you hear these players that go over to play the Scottish to prepare for the Open, but they were quite different.
Yeah. Good point.
I think that for a major, preparing happens on different levels. Obviously you're trying to manage turf conditions and wind and some different things like that. But, at the Open, it was, I would say, probably a more calm condition than I remember in many past years.
Mm-hmm.
So the adversity and that they normally would face of wind and change of weather conditions really didn't. So I think one of the surprises for me was more players didn't make a big move.
Mm-hmm.
I think definitely the British is basically, the Open. The British Open. Again, most links courses are designed for weather. The bad thing about this one is the weather got disproportionately better from Thursday to Friday to Saturday to Sunday. I would say, I imagine the guys when they look at the leaderboard and they see Scottie's name anywhere on the board, they're like, to see the weather keep getting better and better, and the fact that Scottie pulled out to a lead, I'm pretty sure those guys almost probably had a Tiger Woods feel to it where like, I don't think we're going to be able to get this one done today.
Yeah.
And again, they were saying it was boring. I thought it was masterful. I thought he just put on a show on the last day. He just said, hold my beer, boys, and just kind of rolled through the golf and made one mistake over 18 holes. But other than that, just kind of said, bye, guys. And to me, that was very Tiger feeling. Just kind of like, I'm not going to do it to myself. I'm going to end up 3-4 under today. If you're going to cash me, you're going to have to shoot 62, and then when you put that pressure on the field, that's, think of all the careers that Tiger destroyed, from Davis Love to all those guys that were out there, Ernie Els, all those guys trying to shoot 62s all the time. And you just don't manifest that. So I really felt Tiger Woods that he just kind of said, bye. Does it different. Hits fairways. Tiger didn't hit fairways, but would do other stuff. But overall, I was really kind of the big pull away. I was just like, God, this is like 90s golf right here.
Yeah.
But it was kind of fun to watch for me. So let's dive in here. He gave us about a 5-minute philosophy lesson. So I went ahead and I actually downloaded the whole his whole speech, put it in some software, put it to text, and went ahead and pulled out 4 main themes that we'll talk about today. So quote number 1, this would be the fleeting high of winning. If I win, this is Scottie, of course. If I win, it's going to be awesome for about 2 minutes. And then I'm going to get up, go to the next event, and be like, what's next? So the fleeting excitement of winning. So I guess the question is what is that, Mike? And then what can we do to prevent our player from having that?
Yeah, right. Well, I didn't take him literally with the 2 minutes. Definitely more figurative terminology to make his point. But his point, yeah, absolutely, is that it doesn't last very long. And that is the norm. I mean, that's the norm for anybody in any accomplishment or any situation or any big thing. We take a look at the research on lottery winners, for instance, and that's pretty well known that lottery winners are no more happy a couple months, maybe 3-4 months, maybe 5 months, but at least 6 months to a year, they're no more happy than they were before winning, even the huge lotteries. New problems come into play, new stressors come into play. And then who they were before is still who they are today. And therefore, the way that they interpret what happens, the way they respond to things, the emotions they experience, oftentimes the negative emotions, they stay the same. So we'll also take a look at the other side. There are people who have had really bad accidents and who have become disabled. And they're also just as happy as they were before after you push that out a few months, because that same person is still within them. And now they just have a new way of having to go through life. But they don't necessarily change and become depressed for long, if they do become depressed. So you see this all the time. So that's the first thing I wanted to throw out there, that good and bad things don't necessarily create long-term changes in people. The next thing, though, more related to Scheffler's comment, was a couple things. Like a guy like him who's really achievement oriented. I mean, so yeah, he talks about all the other aspects of his life and the deeper desires of his heart. But he also says, sometimes I don't understand why I want to win so badly. So he also threw that out there. And I think that I'm going to guess that is a bit of a interesting curiosity within himself. That in one sense, all these other aspects of life are so much more important to him. And yet he still wants to win really badly. And so here's the thing I would throw out there. When we're younger, there are certain kinds of experiences that we have that allow us to feel really good. And those are different for different people. So if it's achievement, it means when we have these accomplishments, we get all these kind of nice, warm kinds of interactions with our parents and other people around us. And we get this sense that when this happens, that's when life is really good. It feels really good. They don't think about it as kids, but it's a psychological, emotional state. And then they start going after that state. That's a very typical thing. And so if it's something else, for some people, it's more the social stuff. It's more the relationship orientation, or even the really close relations and emotional intimacy that makes them feel good. And so you start to understand that people differentiate their needs in life early on based on what kind of experiences they have on the basis of what they just did. And then they start putting that into these, in a sense, all these different accomplishment pieces. So you see a lot of athletes who have a really strong need to compete, and they love that. Well, that's a part of that complex of various situations that have one thing in common: accomplishment and achievement. And so what happens is, in these achievements, you get a guy like Scottie Scheffler, who I'm guessing has a very high need for achievement. So he goes after and puts so much work into the golf game, and he spends a lot of time with it. He enjoys it. We'll get to that in a little bit. And yet the accomplishment is going to feel good. But the thing about people with a high need for achievement is a couple things that they really care about a lot. They care about constantly checking their progress, because they're always having goals of getting better, and they're always wanting to check that progress. They always want to know their feedback. Now, looking at Scheffler, he's always checking, of course, his grip and his face to make sure they're aligned. But not only that, you also see him after the shots checking the face to see, based on a shot, where did he hit it on the face? That's a feedback piece that he's always wanting to know so he can adjust when he needs to. The other thing about people with high need achievement, they feel like they have to earn what they get. Otherwise, it's not going to be satisfying. So for him to put in all this kind of work is not surprising, because that's going to allow him to feel like he earns it.
Yeah.
Or he earned it. And that's going to make it more satisfying, even though it may not last that long. So those are just a few things that are surrounded around the main question. But in reality, there's no way that we can maintain the same feeling for very long. Feelings change on a regular basis. Our emotions are based on the events that are happening in the moment. Those emotions are not long-lasting. Emotions are short-lived, and they're based on the way that we're interpreting the meaning of the event right now. And so the fact that event is done means the next day you got a new event. He just went to the Happy Gilmore 2 premiere, like the next night.
Yeah.
And so now he's got something else he's doing, interacting with people and interpreting the meaning of that situation as he goes, like we all do. So now all of a sudden, emotions can change. So that's joy doesn't necessarily last that long because emotions are short-lived. So that would be my main, more direct answer to that question. That's just the way we function. And now his mood might stay pretty decent for a pretty long time. He might be in a better mood for a while. He would. But that's a little different than the joy and this high that he was talking about that he doesn't experience for very long.
Chris, have you had any players that have done anything like had this introspection of, this is it? Like, I've put in all this work to break par, to break 80, and wow.
Yeah, I think players view winning or view progress or success in different ways. I haven't had players that have had that realization, but I also have had very few players that had the outside of golf team surrounding family experience that Scottie currently has, or at least portrays that he has. And that's what I find so interesting with Scottie, is that it's not really his identity. Winning is important to him. He wants to do it, and he's driven to work on his game and be the best. And even when he plays well at any event, he actually comes away and says, yeah, I got some things to work on. So I think the outcome of what he's trying to extrapolate from the round is, yes, the feeling of winning is limited, right? But the experience that I've gained from winning is going to carry on over a longer period of time and allow me the opportunity to implement those things into winning more in multiple events at a higher level. So it's going to be really neat to see how this continues to evolve. It'll be interesting to see how other players start interacting with their own development, as far as, is this going to be a really good process for me to try? He seems extremely happy the way he does it, and happiness, and I'll let Mike touch in on this, but that plays a big role in performance.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's interesting. You're right. I think a lot of people will start to think about, wow, look at Scottie. He's the best player in the world. And look at his attitude and way of thinking about winning. And it doesn't seem to be as important to him. But what's interesting is I think a lot of people will make the mistake to think, so if I don't care as much about winning, maybe that'll help me win. Okay, so a little bit of irony there.
That's right.
And I don't think that's going to be the thing that's going to work for him. Because I think with Scottie Scheffler is a genuine piece there. And so if somebody tries to take on his same attitude just so they can win, I think they've lost the point. And yeah, it's a little bit of a trap there.
No, I think so. I think it's interesting. David Duvall was a great story. I used to know his coach, and when he won the Claret Jug, kind of his first major, they were celebrating afterwards, and it was like they're in the pub that evening, and he literally looked at the trophy as the story and said, "This is it. I've worked my whole life for this." And if you watch his career after that, it just was kind of a slow descent to, he lost his card, and now he's trying to play some on the senior stuff. But, for a time, he was Tiger's rival. And then, but they said the story was, they're at the pub, I think St. Andrews, where he won, and just was like, this is it. Like, he had this whole
something.
Yeah. So, it's just a different way. Again, his whole concept of life was to win, to win, to win, from what I've heard. And then he won, and he was like,
yeah. Isn't it a story that's as old as time, really? It doesn't matter what it is. There's certain things that really fulfill people, and there are things that don't. Yeah. And some people, what you're describing with David Duvall, it's like, wow, that was a realization really fast, just really quickly, right after it happened. Yeah. Other people, they don't get it for a long time. It takes them a long time of struggling a little bit before they finally realize that that's just not really the way to go in life. It has its too many traps, and it leads to too much frustration and anger and forcing things and trying too hard and neglecting relationships and all these different things. And it ends up costing them so much more than they gain.
Yeah.
But it happens all over the place, whether they're business people or
That's true. It transcends everything, doesn't it? So let's jump over here to our next theme. We'll throw this one to you, Chris. This is kind of motivation and kind of a purpose crisis. Quote, why do I want to win this tournament so badly? Sometimes I just don't understand what the point is. So kind of playing off of that, off of kind of David Duvall and then again the great philosopher Scottie Scheffler. What happens to an athlete that no longer knows why they compete? So, what are your thoughts on helping players understand why they compete? And can that help address that?
Yeah, I think players certainly have an internal mechanism and a desire to be successful, especially all high achievers. And, high performers want to put in the work, and they will really do most anything as far as skill acquisition, performance, nutrition, fitness, to be the best at what they do. The interesting part about, why do I want to win so badly is that when you tee it up in an event, or whether you're playing a basketball game as a team for, an NBA team, that's the end game, is to win. And, I think not only win the tournament, but I think the interesting thing about Scottie is that there's more to his winning than just winning the tournament. I think being his personal best, wouldn't it be interesting to say, well, what's your PB? What's your personal best? What do you have in mind for this event? You shot mid 60s, low 60s. Was anything on the radar that was better than that? Or, what is his scorecard consist of? What are the boxes that he's trying to check? And I bet you they are very different than other players. And some of those boxes probably are not even related to the game of golf. Yeah. I think a lot of those are related to social things. I think maybe visiting a site there in North Berwick or in Scotland, or at the Open at Portrush, and spending time to separate so he can differentiate and put even more focus and time on, winning in the end. Why a player wants to win so bad? It's drive, desire. The interesting thing about Scottie is, in the end, he says it doesn't really fulfill him, or if it does, it's a very short period of time. But other players, when they win, they have a very different emotional response to that. And then their identity starts to be revolving around that. And I think that's the uniqueness about Scottie, is his identity is not wrapped up in the game of golf. And he's made that very well known.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and what a healthy way to be. And for him, of course, it's his religious foundations and commitment that allow him to experience his identity in a different way. And for a lot of people, that is what it is. But the thing is, what's interesting is that I teach a course called Psychology and Christianity, for instance, in college. And we talk about a lot of these things, and the idea that, yes, even religious people, they have their own psychology. Yeah. They have their own physiology. They have their own patterns. So it's not as though the psychology is just gone because we're Christians or Muslims or whatever religion somebody has as a foundation and a commitment. The psychology is always still going to be there. It's something that you try to work together and try to come to some union, some unity between. And I think, like I said earlier, I think when Scottie was talking in that interview, I think he alluded to that he's not fully unified with that yet, because sometimes he wonders, why does it matter so much? Well, that's his psychology. That's really much his psychology. But his other value systems that relate to his identity relate to the role that he's playing in his life. Usually identity is considered like, what's your place in this world? That's identity typically. And his place in this world is to worship and provide and be a good model of his Christian faith, and to help others along the way. So you go back to that first Masters that he won, and that morning on Sunday where he was so anxious. Yeah. And his wife Meredith brings this up. He said, well, if you shoot 10 strokes over par, or if you win, what's going to be different about you? And that certainly helped calm him down greatly that first time. And that gives a good example of how the two of them together have a unified identity, it appears, as a married couple. But I think overall, your question also comes back to the difference between intrinsic goals and extrinsic goals. So extrinsic goals are things like that you need from other people.
Yeah.
So fame, public recognition, money, reputation, public image, all that kind of thing, that's required from others. And so you don't have as much control over that, but a lot of people chase that. And people chase that as kind of a cheap substitute for the deeper needs and or deeper values that are congruent with who that person is. And I think a lot of people struggle with it. It's a growth process. We all developing over time. And it's not like we just get there one day. And so the idea is to have golf, if you're a golfer, be congruent with with who you are, your interests, your preferences, and especially your values. And if you can find a way to make sure they're integrated together, then you don't have those kind of motivational conflicts that lead to tension and anxiety and fear and all the other stuff that comes along with it. And I think that's where he's farther along than most golfers by a long shot, I think, in
That's
relation
right.
to that.
That's right. I watched the first season of what was that Netflix show, whatever the documentary was, where they talked about Brooks and his wife and
Yeah,
all that. I was like, completely different feel than Scottie and his wife. Just
a little
completely
bit,
different. It just
little
seems like
bit.
two different
Yeah,
worlds.
yeah, it is. It's a different world. Yeah, and it's a developmental process. Some people are more existential oriented and they like to reflect on life and they'll get there earlier. Other
Yeah.
people it's just not there yet, and it takes a while to figure out that this route they're going isn't really their most fulfilling route. And it takes some pain usually to get there, right? The other thing I was going to say, though, real quickly, is that intrinsic motivation, though, the intrinsic goals are the ones that relate to creativity, exploration, curiosity, excellence, mastery. Like I would say what Chris was saying earlier. What is his scorecard? His scorecard could be more personal about who he is out there and how he conducts himself on the golf course. Is he controlling himself? Is he control of his emotions and his behavior and actions and everything? Those are all things that related to their character possibly that could also be part of their scorecard, which to me are more intrinsic if those are values that they care about. And those are the ones that are definitely more fulfilling in the end. And that's what can keep somebody practicing for 4 to 6 hours a day or longer, and also have a balanced life at the same time by having the kinds of motivational control that kind of stuff gives you. That's, I would say, just allows you to have that integrity, that lack of conflict, or being undivided in what you're doing, which to me is what I think all of us would like to be most of the time, undivided in our motivational life. And I think that's what it sounds like he is. And what he's trying to do is have that also be for the competitive rounds, not only his practice and training and all of that. And it sounds like he's doing a pretty dang good job of
The
all of
last
that.
3 years have been pretty good at it.
Yeah, I think so.
So, and going back to that kind of intrinsic, extrinsic kind of point of view, I remember at Virginia, we had, at the time when we signed this player, she was the highest ranked player we'd ever signed, was like a top 10 in the nation. Came to the school, didn't love golf at all, was very, very good at golf. Her persona was golf because everybody knew her for golf, but she did not like the game. And so she would have to do a lot of and her family would do a lot of extrinsic reinforcements, like how many birdies, we'll give you a certain amount of money for them, trying to keep her in the game. But having none of that intrinsic worth, that love for the game, that, again, I want to figure out how to get better. She was also the athlete that at the last ACC she played in, she couldn't get the ball off the ground by a foot. So the third round of the ACC, literally, she started hitting toppers with her driver, and there was nothing we or anybody could do to get that ball airborne. And it was probably one of the weirdest times of my life where it was a really good player, and her career ended at Carmel Country Club in Charlotte, North Carolina, just like that. And so as a parent, it's good to reward your kids for playing well, but how can you help your kid become a little more intrinsic and promote the love of getting better and working hard and doing those things, and not to get it so far out of balance where the athlete is, again, I don't want to work them so hard where they get no pats on the back, nothing extrinsic. But what happens when it gets too far out of whack?
Yeah. Want me to start, or Chris, do you have
Sure.
anything to say right away on that?
I'll let you fill in from this, but I think the thing that I really work to relay to players, especially elite juniors in that range, or hopefully this conversation happens before college at some level, but that, and I use they in the quotes, they won't remember what you shot, but they will remember how you treated them and how you behaved, and you start to create some of those core values to players, and they start to have more of that intrinsic viewpoint, and they start to develop some of those things into their daily practice and skill acquisition. And it's not just I do it one day and just it has to be something that's part of the culture as you grow and play, whether that be individually, family, team concept from the college coaches and beyond, team concept from, as Mike knows very well, you have other coaches in there and in that team concept, and some are very successful as a team and some kind of have coaches and players go in and out of there. So that core element is a big piece to development for those players to be successful.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, if a player has parents who are just really pretty extreme, creating a lot of difficulty and hardship for the player because of that extrinsic stuff, especially, bribing and caring so much about those outcomes that becomes the way they define their own child. I mean, those are the kind of things where having other adults who can balance that out a little bit, help them realize there's another way. There's another way that people can see you other than just as a failure or success in your performance. And so I love that. I love the fact that you can bring some other people in that can make a big difference. There's a lot to this one, certainly, of trying to help foster a more intrinsic culture, which is true. Family culture, team culture. Number one, I would say people need to understand what intrinsic motivation is a little bit more specifically. So I'll just quickly talk about it. So intrinsic motivation is about doing things because it's really enjoyable. All right, we'll start there. That's true. That's the reason for it. It's, I like doing this, therefore I'm going to do it. All right, but what makes something enjoyable is the next question that I'd like to go down into a little bit, because I think this gives us a little bit, well, a whole lot, actually, a lot of information that we can utilize to help parents. So what makes something enjoyable to anybody? It doesn't matter what the activity is. It would be getting 3 needs met. And especially one or two of them, maybe the third one isn't always involved, but the first one is autonomy. And I know we've talked about autonomy before, but autonomy is this sense that we're choosing to do this, and I feel free to make this choice. That's pretty much all it is. But how many golfers don't feel free to make the choice to go play golf? Certainly the golfer you were talking about, Brian, didn't.
Yeah.
They were being bribed, in a sense, to keep playing. That's not a feeling of, they're not going to feel free then. They might say, yeah, I'm choosing to make the money. That's different than choosing to play golf. Very different deal. So number one is autonomy. Parents who subtly or directly have language that seems controlling to the player will automatically make it very difficult for that player to feel any sense of autonomy. It is the perception of the player. It's not a direct cause from the parent to the player, or a coach to the player for that matter. But in the end, controlling language is the killer of autonomy. And that's in relationship. And so we have to learn how to speak in ways where you're not creating a situation where the person's going to feel the pressure, the tension, and the coercion from you to do this. And so that's number one. And that takes some more work and some ways to do that. But number two, need is competence. So if you're going to be intrinsically motivated, autonomy is the foundation. Number two is competence, a sense of that you're getting good at this. You're able to do it. You're able to continue to improve your skills. That you can be effective at making a difference in the world at that moment. So that could be hitting a golf ball. That's making an impact on the environment. That's what competence really is making an impact on the environment. And so you start out, with beginners, just being able to contact the ball is making some impact on the environment, that particular ball, and that can be exhilarating for that player, right? And the standards keep increasing and increasing and increasing, hopefully not to the level of perfectionism, and hopefully the parents aren't always unsatisfied with it because their standards are so high and the player's still here. And so we got to figure out the whole standard piece and making sure that that's correct, or else that player's not going to feel competent. If they don't feel competent, they're not going to have fun or enjoy it. So there's got to be this really careful progression that most probably a lot of people aren't thinking about. Number three is relatedness, is just being close to those around you, people who value you, like you, accept you, etc. And if the parents are only accepting you on the basis of performance, then the only time you're feeling like you are accepted is when you perform well to the standards of your parents. Of course, that's a lousy situation, a terrible situation. I mean, your whole acceptance and feel good and enjoyment is based on somebody else's arbitrary views and beliefs.
Yeah.
It's just a horrible scenario. So I would just say, remembering autonomy, competence, and relatedness, and making sure those are the foundations of relationships, because that's when it seems to people really blossom big time. And that's when intrinsic motivation has a continuous chance to live out across a long period of time.
Wish I would have known that back then. I don't think it would have helped. We only had a week.
Yeah, that's it was kind of like, it's tough. It is tough for a coach to come in and fully replace the whole life experience of that player. I mean, that's a lot to ask of a coach, but it can, over time, when you develop a relationship of autonomy and relatedness and that competence, that can really make a big difference, but it takes time.
Yeah, I understand. All right, so let's jump down here to our next theme, kind of loving the grind over the glory. So the quote was, I love putting in the work. I love being able to practice. That's what I enjoy doing. So again, Scottie's talking about what he loves, kind of what we just talked about, that intrinsic, he likes the intrinsic worth, me getting better, kind of putting in the work, and then everything else is gravy. So why in this generation now does everything seem 180 degrees opposite of that? Give it to me now. I don't want to put in the work. Just give me the trophy. I want to be the boss. Well, you've never really worked, so how can you be so how, what does this say kind of societal where it's going on, and why Scottie is preaching differently to a lot of the choir out there?
Chris, you have some thoughts on this one? Grind over glory. I love that.
Yeah, I think he certainly is more involved in the process. He knows the process is going to dictate the outcome, and he doesn't chase the bait of the outcome. He lets it be a result. A result is just that. It's a result. And he's got a really good process in place. He knows what he needs to do. He knows his strengths. He keeps them current and makes them stronger. He identifies his weaknesses based on stats and the environment and the things he needs to work on to change, in his environment that allow him to be successful and the people he's around. And, it is different versus looking for that satisfaction coming from other people telling you you're good, or, getting that outside viewpoint that is so short-lived, and it really is that flickering flame that really just fizzles out very quickly.
What you just said really triggered some thought in my mind, like going back to the idea of this is it in relation to this question now. We all have these value hierarchies. We have these hierarchies of do this because of this. Well, what do I get from this? Well, I get this. And it's always a little higher value system, a little more abstract, a little more general. Well, if you come down to it and you get one of these outcomes, whether it's glory or whatever it is, and then you realize there's nothing else, there's no other value above this that I can think of. This isn't getting me anything extra that's even better than what this is. So it's like, maybe there's a realization that this is the end and this isn't where the end is that I want it to be anyway. I don't want the end to be here. So maybe there's a little bit realization that, gosh, this doesn't give me anything more. And there's more. There's more because they've experienced more, hopefully, in their lives that's much deeper or higher in their value systems. So maybe that's a part of what happens there. But he just described Scottie Scheffler as very mastery oriented in the way he is in his achievement. So mastery orientation is like going after excellence. That's what it is. And it's about, what can I do to continually get better? And there's a different way that some people define success, and that's an ego orientation. And ego orientation is, if I beat you, then I'm successful. Whereas the mastery orientation, if I get better, I'm successful. So I think that's probably feeding into this whole piece here, where he's not as satisfied with the win as he might want, or as some people thinks he should be, because maybe he's more mastery oriented than ego oriented. And the ego oriented is going to define success as winning, and they're going to get a real big, intense, good feeling out of that because they're at the top. They're dominating. So that's an interesting piece. I don't know, I don't know him enough to know which direction, but based on, he's definitely mastery oriented. Now you can have both. You can be mastery oriented and really define success as getting better, but you can also be the ego oriented person where, hey, maybe I didn't play very well, but I still won, so I still feel good. People are different in relation to these. They're not opposites of each other. You can have both, high, low, middle, or whatever. But I think that mastery orientation allows the grind to actually be satisfying. That's what I'm really trying to say there.
Yeah.
Where the glory isn't as important. Secondly, people have growth mindsets and fixed mindsets. Some people believe that our abilities can continue to get better through practice and training. Other people tend to believe that effort isn't as important, or instruction and training, and that really there's something inside that they either possess or they don't that really is the cause of their abilities. So if someone's more of a fixed mindset, they tend to devalue effort. And what happens then when they run into trouble, when they get into a slump or something like that, they don't know what to do, because their whole lives, maybe they were told, you have this gift, and they also didn't have the other part that said, effort is really the key, but, nice to have a good start. Well, they have the only one side of it, the gift part, the natural part. And though they don't learn what to do when things aren't going well, because they don't even think about the strategies by which are under their control to actually move forward, which is the whole effort piece.
Yeah.
So I think that's a real problem among a lot of people. And whether or not Scheffler thinks he's got some gift or not, he probably does. A lot of high athletes do. But he also has the growth with it. You can't just be fixed. You got to have the growth with it.
No, I think it's interesting, because if you kind of think of the glory, kind of the ego side versus kind of the mastery side, the ego, like, we ran stats for a lot of years, and the one thing we do know is if you win on the PGA Tour, the chances of you winning next week is about zero. If you get, the glory guys, and winning takes you out. You have more press junkets. You have, late night TV show. Like, all these things change. So Scottie is one of the few out there that, I don't say he can't win the next week. And he's done it.
So
he's done it enough now where he can win multiple weeks. So I think, again, that goes more into that mastery. Like, yeah, I won, but again, I could have done 7 things so much better. I won the last event, but I could have done 7 things better. And my goal is to get those 7 things better in this event. So I think, again, that's that mastery kind of component of it. And
I agree.
He is definitely an outlier inside of the PGA Tour.
Totally. I might add one more piece, and then one more thing about that is, what happens over time when we're learning from our experiences is that we form expectations. We just do. That's what we do. We have predictions about the future. And as we go, we're going to have these prediction errors, which means we either predicted something that didn't turn out as well as we thought, or it's better than we thought, or it's right on. But over time, if you win enough, I would think that you've learned that your expectation is pretty high that you can win. But what happens to us is if our expectation is such that we've learned that, and then the event matches that expectation, we do not experience as strong of a feeling. We just don't. It's not like if we were surprised that we won, that's going to be a more intense feeling. Or if we're really surprised that we lost, I suppose that would be too. It'd be more of a disappointment depending on your value systems and so on. Learned, and now you just, not that he's expecting to win, but if it's a little higher expectation that is kind of the same that's been happening a lot, you would kind of predict based on the research that you wouldn't have as strong of a feeling when you win because of the matching of the expectations. And that's kind of what happens as we learn about anything.
That
It's
goes
like,
back to
okay, like the first person who's trying to make a 3-foot putt, like when they're really young, they keep missing, they pretty start making it a lot. How excited are they going to be after a while when they make that 3-foot putt?
yeah.
Not going to be that exciting anymore.
For some of my
So,
players, they get really excited.
so I don't know. I just threw out a little speculative thing there. Maybe this going on as well.
That might even go back to our first conversation of the expectation of when he wins, it's 2 minutes.
Yeah,
Like I kind of
exactly.
expected, it's just what I do. This is
What I do.
This is what I do.
That's yeah.
All right,
Exactly.
let's see here. We're gonna break into our last theme because we are hitting kind of the 50-minute mark here. This is actually a really good one, especially for junior golf, especially for collegiate golf, as well as tour golf. That status is a mirage. So think about it. The quote is, "You don't become number one in the world by thinking about rankings." How great is that? So, how many kids did I recruit were so daggone gung ho about what their rating was? And again, to me, this is going back to the beauty of this is our first segment really answers all of these questions. But Chris, I'll go ahead and give it to you. And again, I love the status as a mirage. I think that was pretty clever.
I think so.
But go
Yeah.
ahead, Chris.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's so many ranking systems out there. Obviously, the PGA Tour and the FedEx Cup, but even down to the ranks of Junior Golf Scoreboard, right? I mean, they're ranking, and a true statement to that is a very, very small percentage of the ranked players on there are recruited. However, you do have the other number of people that might be 600 or 800 or whatever they are ranked. 700 doesn't really matter. It's just a ranking, right? And it's based on tournaments you've played in, what events, what tours. So obviously, if you're playing in more events, there may be a potential. There's different points for different events. So the ranking is just a number. It has nothing to do with you as a player, how well you're playing. There may be some scores thrown in there. However, if you play good golf and you win events and you do the work to allow yourself to win, those coaches will find you. I promise you.
Yeah, that's great. Have you found with your players that they do have a really strong attention to those rankings? And have you found that you've needed to have conversations with some players?
Yeah, it's a status
Yeah.
thing. My number is, right? And they know where everybody is. But the reality is I've seen a lot of players in the hundreds beat a lot of players in the under 25.
Yeah, that's good. Well, I mean, they can get obsessed with it, certainly. And I will say that overall, I don't think it's inherently bad to care about something that's an outcome in the distant future that can happen. It could lead to some people putting more effort in, more discipline in their work, seeking out new opportunities to learn. Those are things that could happen with a long-term kind of goal. But as long as that it doesn't come to the forefront, certainly, while you're practicing and learning, unless unless again it's something that pops in that kind of gives you a little spark, and then you let it go. I think the main thing is, like, I think a lot of tour players are working on these kinds of things. I think they're working on these. The whole saying is you focus on the process, not the outcome. That's been around a long time now, and I think people are understanding. Justin Thomas, I know he still puts these goals out that are all these external kind of outcome goals. And at one point, I think he's going to stop just because someone's going to tell him this isn't really helpful.
You should
It's
call him.
not helping you. That's not going to do it unless you need something like that to work
Yeah,
hard. But I doubt he needs that to work
I
hard.
don't think he does either.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think he's got the wrong idea about it. But yeah, that's okay. Whatever he wants to do. But I would say that a lot of times what happens is when they're chasing these kinds of things and they're putting too much focus on them, then it's so much easier to get those negative emotions going during competitive rounds. I mean, it's so quick to get frustrated, so quick to get angry, so quick to lose their patience, so quick to lose their presence. And then, of course, when they lose their presence, they're not going to bring in all the information they need and the relevant information. And then their decision making takes it. It happens at the highest levels. Um, and they can get discouraged, disillusioned. They might start forcing things. They might start kicking nice lockers at nice golf clubs. Things like that might happen as well. So,
Well, yeah. Well, I have one for you, Mike. Let's think of Bryson's comments. All right, after the first day, he shoots, I don't know, 79, or he's not, I can't, 70 something, way up there, and he was like, I just want to go home, like, I just want to go home. He comes back and shoots like 16 under on the last 3 days, right? So I know collegiately when I used to recruit, like, the biggest joke on earth, I hate to say it, is the AJGA ranking system, right? So I would see really, really good players pull out of tournaments because they weren't putting up a number because they were so concerned about ranking, because that's my ability to go to college, that they would be like, oh, I'm shooting a bad score. Oh, my back hurts. So they just walk off the golf course and they wouldn't get penalized because the system wasn't set up that way. So, like, how cool was, kind of I think it goes back into our intrinsic, extrinsic rewards. So if I'm teaching my athlete that if you're not playing well, just to walk off the golf course, what kind of damage am I doing to them in the future? And then, for as many barbs as Bryson gets, and many well deserved, him just sitting there going, hey, my father taught me that if you're going to do this, you've put your name on the board, you will be in there until they tell you to go home. So what are some of the dangers out there, and a lot of parents that are, again, kind of in the mirage, in that, kind of validation trap of thinking the kid has to be ranked high to go to college, so I'm going to make sure that their points are right, and not learning the lessons of life of saying, golf is freaking hard. Like, you're going to have variability in score, and you're going to shoot some big ass numbers at the most important event you play in your life. That's just part of it. So what are your thoughts on kind of, again, Bryson being a role model, which is cool, and the fact that there are a lot of parents out there that are really sabotaging their kids' futures?
yeah. Chris, you got something on this one?
Fire away, Mike.
Okay, I'll go for it. So,
Dive on that grenade.
you got live scoring today. That's been happening for many years now, obviously.
Yeah.
But live scoring, it's interesting that we don't talk as much about the effects of having live scoring as we could, because it is a big deal. A lot of players are very self-conscious about their scores, not only for ranking purposes, but just their peers. They don't want their peers to see that they scored high. What's wrong with them? They couldn't play this course well. What's going on with you? So one way to get your score gone is to withdraw. So now your score isn't shown on there, because otherwise it's going to be skyrocketed. And what are people going to think about you? And this whole culture we have in public announcements and impression management to all sorts of people through social media, that doesn't help people in terms of how they're going to feel when it looks bad, because they don't ever put anything bad out there. So now there's got a score that looks bad. I think that's a problem. I even have an issue now. I realize there are reasons why that seem legitimate, and I'm not judging too hard on this, but I don't even like to see mini tour events or qualifiers where people withdraw. I don't even like that. It's like, okay, obviously you're not going to make it in after shooting 80 or shooting 40 on the first 9. Maybe you're not, but you still could. and you just pick up and leave. I'm not a fan of that. And maybe that's just like this idea is like here's a quality that is like, why are you just going to pick it up and leave because you don't think you have a chance? Is that the only reason you play, is to get into that PGA tournament or Korn Ferry Tour tournament? Because obviously it must be. Otherwise, you're not. Otherwise, you would have continued to play. There's so many things you could still have as goals for that second 9 that could make a huge difference toward your future game.
Yeah.
Maybe you pick something up you just had never done before. There's all sorts of good things. So I don't even like that. So I agree that I think finishing is almost, it's really a duty if you start, unless you're hurt and something really has happened. Unless some really crazy thing happened, like we got a delay and now you've got to get home. You're not going to spend the money on a hotel. Those are things like they're different. Understand the logistics sometimes of those situations. But no, I don't think, I think they don't do themselves any favors in terms of their character development or what could happen in that second 9. And I think if the parents are the ones who are pushing for that, that's giving a really bad message to that child. It's like your score is the only thing that matters, and maybe we shouldn't let anybody else see it either. Yeah, I don't like it.
It's a lot out there.
I try to help. Yeah, I try to help players. If coaches are going to be watching them during the recruiting process, I'm trying to help them reframe that. Say, here, you're in a situation that you want to play college. It is so good you've got coaches watching you. That's exactly what you would want.
That's right.
Rather than the other way around. That's a perfect scenario for you.
No,
It's like,
it's
great. Have the coaches
definitely
see you.
interesting out there.
Yeah, you've seen it. You both have seen a ton. I know you have.
It's excuse my French, it's a shit show out there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll never forget. I was recruiting one of our players. God, this is a long time ago. Callie, who's now the University of Richmond's coach. I went and watched her play in Pennsylvania, and the 2 girls she was playing with were top 20s in the country. And one of them went like double start, and after about the 5th hole, kind of said, "I'm hurt," left. So Callie's like, okay, and she's playing with another girl. And about on hole 9, she's not playing well. She decides to leave too with another phantom injury. So literally, Callie was standing there on the 9th, going on the 10th tee box, and her threesome was over. So they had to find a marker for her real quick. And some guy just basically walked with her and counted her score. So she's playing as a single behind a threesome. Like every adversity, really, for her, it was really unfair if you really think about it. Now she's waiting, 10 minutes a shot. I mean, so she is just under this weird. And that was the day I looked at her. I would put her on my team any day because she shot right around even par. Talked to the guy, killed the 10 minutes, just played masterfully with just all hex breaking loose around her. But I'm just sitting there going, there's 2 top 20 players in the world. I wouldn't want them on my team. And then she was like, let's get after it. So, to me, it was just interesting to watch kind of that all kind of, you knew exactly what was happening. Like it was very obvious what was happening. I'm just sitting there shaking my head as a coach going, why would I want those 2 on my team? And why would I not want her? Okay, she's the 50th best player in the country. Like, she's disproportionately a better team player, for college golf than these 2 would ever be. So I thought that was really interesting. And it was dumb luck that I was out there that day, but I was just sitting there going, wow, you really, I after the round, I couldn't talk to her, but it was pretty much the next conversation we had. I was like, that was impressive. Like for a coach to watch that, where it would have been really easy to shoot huge numbers or, say, oh, I was playing well till they left. And all like, no, just kind of played. So I thought that was really,
That's awesome.
And again, a really interesting way. And for the athlete that's aspiring to maybe play college golf, play professionally, like Mike said, don't quit, man. You might get a feel on the second hole in the back 9 that will allow you to win the next event. Maybe that's that one piece. They're like, oh, that is what I've been missing. I needed that. And how will that fuel me for the upcoming runs opposed to,
True.
Yeah, no. And I was always taught as a kid, I had a military dad, like, you do not quit. Like, if you start something, you finish it. At the end, if you don't ever want to do it again, we'll discuss that. But more than that, you do not quit during the season. So I think, when I was recruiting, that mindset was there as well. Like, I'd much rather go to war with her because I know she'll fight, where the other two would be like, yeah, I got better things to do today.
Yeah, exactly. And as a coach who knows you can develop players,
yeah,
it's harder to develop some of those character qualities. You can
can't
develop the
really.
game. Yeah, it's pretty tough.
Qualities are really
You're in
hard.
a tough situation. Yeah. So yeah, it's very good.
All right. So we'll go ahead and wrap this puppy up. We're sitting right about an hour. So any other thoughts you had on Scottie and his philosophical views, and we'll wrap this puppy up, Chris?
I think he's spoken where he stands, and I think as he grows, as the environment changes, as things change, I think he'll adapt very well. And I think the most important part about that is he's willing to adapt, and I think he's excited about the future. So it's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
How about you, Mike?
I just think I think with him it'll be. I think with Chris, I'm really interested in where he goes motivationally and emotionally down the line.
Yeah.
It seems like he's pretty competitive, so it would seem like that would stick around. But I am interested in this whole relationship between his identity and his competitive spirit, where he still can get frustrated and he can still get angry and he can still show he cares about this shot right now, even though in the big scheme of things it doesn't seem to matter. So I'm kind of curious to see what happens with that interesting interaction between those.
Yeah, that again, that was the little dichotomy inside of his you're like, yeah. You're like, well, that's a little different than you just. But anyways, we'll roll with that. No, I think it's exciting.
It time.
Yeah, no, I think it's exciting. And I remember I had a player at Virginia that was really good, and she used to always say, which I thought was for a college player, was, now she might have learned this from somebody, but this was kind of her ethos was, golf is how I choose to compete. Golf is not who I am. And I thought for, a 19-year-old female, really high-end golfer, like having that wherewithal to understand, like, I compete this way. Like, I want to go out and play and compete, and this is what I do. But again, when I get in the van to ride home, whether I shoot 64 or I shoot 84, it's not who I am. And she's as bubbly and happy in the car. Like, she'd be grumpy at times, but just having that kind of mindset, and kind of what Scottie said is like, I love to compete inside this game. I think it's exciting, but this is not who I am. So I think there's a lot to be learned out there.
That's great. That sounds like a person whose competition is more about a test. It's a way to test themselves versus I got to beat this other person. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, no. So
sometimes
there's more of that component of how good am I and how does it stack up, and next week. For her it was really so next week. And as coaches we're like, well, this week we could have been anyways. My job is, kind of, you'll be here next week, but I might not be. No, I think, but but again, I think a lot of players inside of work, I think a lot of people get a little too into work sometimes. So again, work is what I do. It doesn't mean that's who I am. So I think you can take that across every avenue. So I appreciate it, gentlemen. We'll meet again next month, and maybe someone else will drop some philosophy on us, and we can tear into that a little bit. So thank you again. Chris George, you can find him at chrisgeorge.golf.com, correct?
chrisgeorgegolf.com.
Perfect. You can find Mike at, I always get it wrong,
themotivationgame.com.
Motivation Game.
What was that?
I always want to say motivation.
Yep, that's it. Themotivationgame.com.
And again, you can find him on the socials as well. And say hi to Mike when you see him out on tour. Maybe he'll remember us when he's all Superman and having 42 tour players working with him. So thank you, gentlemen, and we will talk to you guys next month. And if you have any questions for any of us, just send it to me and I will pass it around. Cheers. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. All right.
Perfect.